Hello again, friends. How are you guys hanging out? You holding up well in current year? It's finally another day. Sadly, the rain is gone. Life is getting better, as it would appear. Things are not as crazy as they used to be. And I am relaxing. I am making some planks, getting through these. But yeah. So today, I figured I would talk about a subject near and dear to my heart. Content creation and how it impacted video game metas, and in fact ruined, I would argue, a lot of video game metas. Now this might be surprising to some of you that, how could people explaining metas and developing metas for video games have decreased the overall quality of video games? I would argue most people who make this assumption haven't given enough thought. Back in the glory days of video games, let's say, late 1990s, early 2000s, the good old days as one would say, up until late 2010s, actually, yeah. I would say everything up until about Gamergate would be classified as the good old days, at least under my perspective. You might have your own perspective, that's perfectly fine. But from where I'm sitting, those were the glory days. And a lot of what was about video games back then was more so about figuring out your own metas, figuring out the way you wanted to play the game, and individual players had a lot more creativity in what they, equipped. There was a lot less min-maxing and theory crafting those days. And why is that? Primarily because, high-level content creators didn't theory craft everything, and the information wasn't readily available on how to play video games well. Now, there were certain ideas about how to do that, as there always have been, but things weren't completely and totally solved like they are today, usually. Video games, by this point in time, are usually solved on release. New WoW patches, people have run the simulations, and they already have a fairly good idea of how things are going to turn out, and only minimal changes are going to be required. Usually it's someone with a stroke of brilliance that will edit whatever, the simulation says and come up with something new that changes how people see the game and how people see things going forward. And without that, I would argue that because of how easy content creation and the general YouTube and all of the information related to video games has made, video game strategy, very few people actually think for themselves when they play video games. They don't consider a lot of things. There's, always just some guide you can follow. And for the most part, if you give people an easy out that's going to be, somewhat at least the most efficient thing they can probably think of, then there's going to be a lot less innovation in total. So the main problem with video game strategies and video game metas as they have been evolved in the content creation era, i.e. Gamergate, after Gamergate, in the mid, 2010s, we'll say, is because people these days do not think when they play video games. They follow exactly the strict set of rules that they're supposed to. They experience it as, they want in the most efficient way, and game developers now have to design video games, in a sense, to follow the most efficient route from point A to point B and make that enjoyable rather than just putting stuff out there and seeing what sticks. If you look at some of the highlights of video game history, Diablo 2 for instance, or StarCraft, etc., there's not a lot of balance that was ever done, and not a lot of balance in those games. Most of what was figured out through players' ingenuity, and a lot of stuff just doesn't even make sense, especially in early World of Warcraft and a lot of these other things. There's just random things in total, and that's just because the developers thought it was cool. They weren't thinking about any sort of potential metas, and nowadays you have to consider metas, and you have to consider all of these horrible facets when you're designing a video game and when you're playing a video game even. So I'm someone that likes to think, even on old private servers, I was always thinking, always exploiting, always testing, because, things come up. Even on old school RuneScape, I still do things my own way with delayed gratification. I've never heard of anyone waiting till 99 farming to plant a single Renar seed or a single Snapdragon or anything like that, but that's just the way I do things, and I've always thought for myself, and I've always thought in delayed gratification methodology, or, trying to get the most reward out of the minimum amount of resources. The same reason why I'm, plank making now, because I want to do mahogany homes to get my 99 construction, and I don't want to abuse, let's say, Kingdom, because I just don't like Kingdom. I don't like dailies. I don't like going back and doing dailies, so I'm just not going to do it. And with that, I'm looking, at least for me, in my perspective, not doing Kingdom. I'm looking at, I want to chop the fewest logs potentially possible, so, I need to go chop another 20,000 teaks at some point, and then I convert them all and I'll have 99 construction banked. It's not a big deal. And so, when you're thinking like that, or you're thinking in your specific situation, analyzing things that are actually, for you, and then thinking, even if your ideas are not as good as like the high-end gamers' ideas, even if they're objectively worse, even if your Path of Exile build is not as good as, Kriparian or whoever's, right? It's still much more interesting that you're exploring that space and contributing your own build and doing your own thing rather than following some set standard guide. And there's very few people these days that actually contribute anything or do any sort of theory crafting or follow any sort of set standard guides. And usually the people doing anything are the people that are content creators who are trying to make, trying to monetize their brain power and their unique perspective of things. So content creation has really killed the meta for video games. It's actually pretty toxic for making games enjoyable. And video games themselves are not an issue or not a plague on humanity, but social media actually is. That's why I don't have Twitter. That's why I don't have a lot of these other social media. Stop heckin' using social media if you currently do. Like, biggest piece of advice I can give anyone. Cancel social media. Get rid of your phone. Mine doesn't have access. I don't have a phone. You want to contact me, you can email me, or you can meet me in person, or you can send a letter. Carrier pigeon me something. I don't care. You're not, like, you don't have 24/7 access to me. Like, you can Discord message me if you're one of my online friends, and I've let you into that specific circle, right? But if you're just average Joe Schmo, or just like, some spam caller, get away from me. If you're some Twitterite, get away from me, And life's better like that. Yum. Oh, I love mint tea. I'm drinking mint tea today, by the way. Absolutely, positively delicious. But yeah. So, in one of the ways I think people need to start enjoying video games without a set standard guide or a set standard process. Like, obviously some things are going to be best now because developers release things knowing that people are just going to follow a guide anyways, and that the most efficient thing is going to be getting your BOFA because it's intentionally overtuned for Iron Man, it's designed for Iron Man, it doesn't even use ammo, right? So you're going to need to get this particular piece of equipment if you want to play an Iron Man. Yeah, that's probably going to be my next goal, or something I'm going to start on very soon, because I want to have it before 87 Slayer. And I definitely don't want to sit there like holding Slayer back and holding the account back to get it. And then I'm not sure how much PVM I'm going to do before maxing. I might just like go straight to max and then worry about. And obviously I'll do bossing along the way for Slayer that has upgrades until I don't need to do those bosses anymore. Hydra and Cerberus. Smoke Devil Boss to an extent, and then I'll just burst it. But, we'll see. But like, we really need to get away from social media as a whole, as a community. You personally, like, if you're an introvert and you're someone that doesn't like interacting with other people, if you cut your friends circle down smaller, if you work on escaping the control net of social media, if you get off Twitter, if you get off Facebook, if you get off all these platforms, your life is going to be much better, even though you'll be even more isolated. Trust me, as an introvert, you want to be more isolated in the current year than you have ever been before. Like, isolation is how you're going to manage to survive coming forward with the new AI revolution. Your partner is going to be an AI now. You're the only person you're talking to probably for most of your life is going to be an AI. Half the people you talk to on the internet are probably artificial intelligences, like, just coming out and saying it. So, I'm all pumped up, by the way, because I ate my goi slop today. I had my okonomiyaki, so, my cabbage pancake, Japanese style, with, furikake seasoning on top and bonito flakes with, okonomiyaki sauce and Japanese mayo. The goi slop comes from the soybean oil inside of the Japanese mayonnaise. So, awful, but it gives me a lot of energy, so I'm pumped. I usually only eat bad once every, 2 weeks, so, that's my bad thing. And I might even have a little popcorn with some of the spray can olive oil to make the salt stick to it later. I could be a bad boy today, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how I feel if I want it. I might not, but I'll see. But either way, so get rid of social media. It'll improve your video games. Start thinking for yourself when you play a video game and applying things to your specific situation, because even if you're following a straight guide the way you want to play and the things you want to do and don't want to do, you can still make things right. Like, if you're playing Path of Exile and playing Soul Self-Found, for instance, if you're playing SRS or whatever and you want a +2 amulet, just save 15,000 of your red crystals right from the start so you can add the +1 on it. Just basic things like that. Just plot your character around how you're going to develop and, think from the start and then apply it to your own specific situation. Video games need to get to a point where we can't have metas for them anymore, where they're too complicated, where it's too individual, where we need to make gamers think again. It's just, absolutely ridiculous to me that we're in current year and this plague of social media fed, content creation buzzword shenanigans is the norm. Like, for video games to evolve and continue to be good, or to be good again, we need to get away from what the current meta is. We need to start separating video games from content creation. And then if, content creation will be watching someone and watching their own unique journey, like, think like an extreme one chunk Iron Man. It's not something you're going to do, but it's going to be their type of journey, and that should be what content creation is going forward. Rather than, this strict guideline you should follow, like, here's how you kill Cerberus, you red X the boss, or, whatever, like, cheesy stuff someone wants to do that's not fun at all, but it's technically efficient. Like, yeah, it's absolutely haram, in my opinion. It's really time for, people to start working towards escaping from that bubble and start thinking about themselves. Like, back in my day, I developed a lot of the Prop Warrior theory craft around private servers and, the different server patches on the Nestarius, the 1.3 WoW itemization, and all the unique things that brought. And, going forward, it's just crazy to me how we're, 5 years past that point and people still haven't figured out, hey, figure things out yourself. Use your brain a little bit. It'll make the games more fun for you. Trust me. It's your time. Why waste it like that? Why waste it being a, brainless XYZ walking in a straight line type person? Like, it just, come on. I don't know why most people don't do that. Like, literally just think. That's all you have to do. And get the heck off of Facebook and all the other social media. Stop using Twitter, for the love of God. I don't care if Based Boy, Rocket Man owns it now. It's still not good. It never will be good because, in essence, it's bad. Social media is bad for you. Everything related to social media is bad for you. It rots your soul. Stop, for the love of God, I beg you. I'm begging you. Please, friends. And with that, I've Skitzo posted enough. Too much energy. Too high energy. Slow it down. Deep breaths. You have a good day. It's a lovely, lovely May, and I'm quite pleased.